Today, we will explore the differences between SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams. And for business users, it can be confusing to know exactly what these apps are designed to do, how they're connected, and how they are different. Hi, I'm Amy. Let's nerd out. A quick note before we get started is that this video covers a comparison of these three apps. And while we do touch on documents, we do go on a higher level overview of how these applications work together. So, if you would like me to specifically do a video on how to manage documents for beginners from an end user perspective with inside of these applications, then please drop a comment below. Let's start off with an introduction to these three applications. So, the original players were OneDrive and SharePoint. They were designed to help you store and manage files within the Microsoft ecosystem. And then in 2017, Microsoft reimagined the work environment and introduced Microsoft Teams. And this was designed to help the workplace adapt to the evolving work environment, going beyond just files and adding collaboration tools for messaging as well as meetings. So let's now break down each of these and look at their key functionality. So for OneDrive, we can think about this as your personal cloud storage. It's a place for you to store your own work files that are not connected with a team. And you can think about it as your own digital treasure chest. Now, OneDrive is easy to remember because we can think of one equals you. So it's for your own personal files. Then we have SharePoint. So SharePoint is your team's cloud storage, a structured space for your shared files as well as resources. And we can think of SharePoint as your team's digital library. Now, SharePoint is easy to remember because share equals team. So it's for your shared files for your team. And then we have Teams. So Teams is a centralized hub for communication and teamwork, bringing together your chats, your meetings, as well as your document sharing. We can think of Teams as the lively home of your digital workspace, and it is where the collaboration actually happens. And then, if we want to take a look at how Teams and SharePoint are connected, there was a hint on the last slide, but Teams and SharePoint are deeply integrated because every team allows us to access our shared digital library that is stored within SharePoint. So, in summary, we have SharePoint as your team's digital library. We have OneDrive as your own personal digital treasure chest, and Teams as the lively home for your digital workspace. Now, I use these three analogies in my ebook, Navigating Microsoft Passages. And if you haven't downloaded your copy yet, then I'll include a link in the description because it is a really great resource to provide an overview of all of the tools available within your Microsoft 365 account. So now that we have an idea of how each of these applications function, we're going to put them into action. So we're going to learn how to create a SharePoint site, and then we are going to connect that SharePoint site into Microsoft Teams. And then we will look at how we can use OneDrive to access our own personal files, as well as our team files stored within SharePoint. Firstly, let's ensure that you can access these applications. So if you have the desktop apps with your subscription, then you can access the Teams application from your computer. Otherwise, we need to access Teams from our browser, and that's where we're also going to access SharePoint and OneDrive. So from the Microsoft homepage, which is m365.cloud.microsoft, on the bottom left, we can go to apps. Then at the top here, you're going to see your common applications. So here we can see OneDrive, Teams, and SharePoint. So let's select SharePoint. And another helpful tip is that when you are in the web applications, you can navigate to this waffle icon on the top left, and then you can locate the app that you're looking for. So again, we have OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams. And if you don't see the app that you're looking for, then you can simply go more apps, and then you can locate the app that you want. So we are going to start off in SharePoint. SharePoint is organized by sites. So you'll see at the top here on the homepage, we have frequent sites. And then these are your recently accessed SharePoint sites. Now, you might even see some overlap with your Microsoft Teams, and that's what we're going to uncover today. So, in this section, we are going to walk through the creation of a SharePoint site so that you can see the building blocks and how it all comes together. So, at the top here on the left hand side, you're going to see Create Site. And if your button is missing, that just means that your organization limits the number of people that can create sites, but you can still follow along to understand how this all comes together. Let's go create site. Now, at Amy's Animal Shop, we are going to create a team for our new dog apparel line. So, firstly, we need to decide if we want to create a communication site or a team site. So, the communication site is designed for sharing information that engages with a broad audience. So, this is typically for sharing organizational wide HR policies. Whereas with a team site, this creates a private space to collaborate with your team, which sounds like what we're looking for our dog apparel line. We have specific team members that are going to be working on that, and we want to create a dedicated space for them to collaborate with each other. And another key thing here with the team site is that we can connect this with other Microsoft 365 products. So we are going to connect this with a Microsoft team, and we'll also look at some other applications that we can integrate this with later on in the tutorial. So let's select team site. And now here we can select a template. And for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to select the standard team template and then go use template. And now we need to give our site a name. So I'm going to call mine the dog apparel site. We'll notice that when we enter that, some additional information appears. So on the left-hand side here, we'll see that your site will be connected to a Microsoft 365 group. Now, this is a key component, and we're going to come back to the concept of a 365 group later on. And then it says this gives your site a shared OneNote notebook, a group email address, as well as a Teams calendar. In addition to that, on the right-hand side, we can see that a group email address has automatically been created, which can streamline email communication. And we also have a site address. Now, this is one of the key benefits of SharePoint because a SharePoint site is an intranet. So it means that it's an internal website for your team to share and collaborate on content. And to get to that SharePoint site, you want to navigate to this URL. So let's now go to the next area. And this is where we can define our privacy settings. So if we select the dropdown, then you'll see that we can make this a public site, which anyone in the organization can access, or a private, where only members can access the site. Now, we just want this area to be for the team members that are working on the dog apparel line. We don't want everyone in the organization to have access to this content. So we're going to select private, and then we're going to create our site. And now we can define our site owners and members. So owners have full control over the site content. And in this case, if I had a couple of team leads or managers in this dog apparel team, then I could add them as an owner and they would help alleviate some of the administrative settings for this SharePoint site. Whereas with site members, they can just edit and they can view the site content, such as files and pages. So the members would be everyone else that we want to collaborate on the dog apparel line with. In this video, I'm just going to skip this and click finish, but you get the idea. And just like that, our SharePoint site is live. And in this section, we are going to walk through some of the key elements of this left navigation because SharePoint really goes beyond the simplified explanation of sharing files with your team. Let's start off with the homepage. So this is kind of like the homepage of a website. So when you go to visit a website for the first time, this is sort of that landing page for the dog apparel team. Now, these SharePoint homepages are totally customizable. This is just the template based on that site template that we selected when we created the SharePoint site, but you can edit these and totally customize them. So if yours looks a little bit different to mine, then that just means that your team owner or admin has done a little bit of configuration on the back end. And moving along on the left navigation, the next key area that I want to show you is documents. So every SharePoint site comes with a SharePoint document library, and this is your team's shared space to store and collaborate on files. And remember that when we created this SharePoint site, we had that option to add team owners and members. So anybody that we add to this team site automatically gets access to the SharePoint document library. So it really makes for an effective way to streamline the collaboration and sharing of files. And moving along the left navigation, the next area is pages. So this is where we can add additional pages to our intranet. So just how every website has other pages beyond the homepage, this is where we can really start to customize our SharePoint site. And I have created SharePoint pages for policies, project deliverables, and even full blown training manuals. So, SharePoint sites and pages are super flexible and customizable. So, however you want to use them, the sky is really the limit. And the last thing that I want to show you is this add real time chat at the bottom here. So, if we select add Microsoft Teams, then we can follow the prompts and connect this SharePoint site to Microsoft Teams. This would unlock the features of Teams, including real time messaging, as well as meetings and video calls. However, in the next section, I'm going to show you how we can connect the SharePoint site to a Microsoft team, but from the Microsoft Teams app. And here we are within Teams. But before we connect that SharePoint site, I just wanted to pause because I know that some people are missing this Teams icon. So I just wanted to clarify what's happening and where all of your teams are. So Microsoft released a new feature that combines your Teams and your chat icons into one icon called chat. So to switch this view, we can go up to the three dots on the top right and go settings. And then we can go to chats and channels. And at the top here, we're going to have combined or separate. So right now I'm in the separate view, but if we go combined, then it tucks that Teams icon into your chats. Alternatively, you can go in the separate view and it then separates the Teams and the chat areas into two separate spaces. However, with the combined view, the idea is to eliminate content switching because it puts all of your teams and channels and your chats into one area. So it reduces context switching between the two icons on your left navigation. Now that we know where our teams are, we can bring that SharePoint site into Microsoft Teams. So if you are in that combined view, you're going to be in the chat tab. Or if you're in the separate view, then you're going to access this next step from the Teams icon. So from this little drop down here, we're going to go new team, and then we're going to go more create team options. Then on the left, we're going to go from group. Now remember, when we created that SharePoint site, it said that we would also be creating a Microsoft 365 group. So this is where we take that group and we connect it into Microsoft Teams. In this case, we can see that dog apparel SharePoint site or 365 group is here. And now I can simply select add team. And just like that, we have now connected that dog apparel SharePoint site or 365 group into Microsoft Teams, thereby unlocking those real-time conversations as well as meetings and video calls. We are now ready to explore the key elements of a Microsoft team, starting with this first channel, which in this case is called General. So every team has a first channel, and channels is where the teamwork actually happens. And depending on the complexity of your team, you may have additional channels. So, for example, we have this marketing team up here. We'll see that we have that general channel. I've just put a little dash in front of it just so that it can stay at the top of the list. And then we have additional channels for subcategories of the marketing team. So, for example, we have events as well as social media. So channels allow us to break down our team that has a common goal or purpose, which in this example, it's the marketing team, into subcategories. And in this case, it's events and social media. But for the example of this tutorial, we're just going to go through the key elements of a Microsoft team using this first channel, which is called General for the new dog apparel line. So in channels, we have tabs at the top, and this is where your team can organize its contents and easily access all of the information that it needs from one area. So we can see that some have automatically been added here for posts, files, notes, and we can even click that little plus icon to add additional resources. So let's take a closer look at each of these components. Let's start off with the first tab, which is typically called Posts. And this is where we can have real time conversations with our team members. Now, I say typically called Posts because Microsoft just released a new layout. So if we go down to the channel and select the ellipses, then we can go Edit Channel and we'll see Layout. We can have posts or threads. So I think the posts are typically great for one-way broader communication, and then threads are more of a chat style, so they're great for dynamic collaboration. So if we save those changes here, then we can now see how this conversation has now updated. This is just an AI chatbot because I have a license, so you can just ignore what that conversation actually is about. Now, the idea with this post or conversations tab is to have transparent conversations about important updates and decisions with your team members. There's no forgetting to CC somebody on an email. So, because everybody that's on this team is going to have access to this channel, then everyone is going to have all of those important updates visible to them at all times. And if you do want to learn more about using that new threads feature and how it compares to posts, then I have another video that I'll include a link in the description. Moving along, let's go to the Files tab. So this is actually the SharePoint document library that has now been connected to the Microsoft team. And you'll notice that we are right now in Documents and then General. So if we go to Documents, this is the site library. So the SharePoint site document library for this team. And every channel that we create in this team is going to automatically create a folder inside of the SharePoint document library, which creates a really nice way for your team to organize those files. And if we go up to the three dots on the top right here, then we can open this document library in SharePoint. We'll see that we are now in that Documents tab within the SharePoint site. Moving along, we can also access a Notes tab. So this is a OneNote notebook that has now been connected to your team and SharePoint site. However, OneNote is a bit of a legacy note-taking app. Microsoft has released a new collaborative app called Microsoft Loop. So if you click on this plus icon and then go Apps, then you'll see that we can add the Loop application, which then connects a Loop workspace to this Microsoft team, allowing your team to collaborate in a modern workflow within the Microsoft Teams channel. For your notes, I recommend having either OneNote or Loop to ensure that everyone on the team puts notes into the relevant application. And if you are unsure about which app you would like to use going forward, then I will include a link in the description comparing the two apps so that you can figure out which one works best for you. In addition to the Loop app, we can also integrate other applications into our channels. So, for example, we can add a planner plan or even the channel calendar, Power BI. If you have a Microsoft list, you can add that in as well. We can really see how these channels provide that dedicated hub for your team members to access all of the resources from one space. And there is one thing that I do recommend adding here, which is the SharePoint homepage. So if we select SharePoint, you don't see it, you could just search for SharePoint in the top here. But let's go with SharePoint. And then under the recommended, we're just going to select this SharePoint homepage. And we can then save. Now that homepage has been added to our team. And this is where you can add all of these helpful resources and documents, and your team members can access all of those important, relevant items at their fingertips. And the last thing that I want to show you from the channel dashboard is how we can schedule meetings with our team members. So from the top right, we'll see the drop down beside Meet Now, where we can schedule an ad hoc meeting to have an impromptu meeting, which can be faster than messaging back and forth, or you can schedule a meeting with your team members. Now, most of my clients do not schedule meetings appropriately within Microsoft Teams. And especially if your team does have recurring meetings, then I have included a link below to my repeat meeting framework so that you can learn how to get the most out of your recurring meetings to ensure that notes and follow up tasks are set up effectively. Now that we've seen how SharePoint and Teams are connected, let's take a look at OneDrive, which I describe in my ebook as your own personal treasure chest. Now, even though OneDrive is designed for personal document management, so files that are not connected to a team or a SharePoint site, Microsoft still makes it easy to navigate to your SharePoint document libraries from within OneDrive. So there's a bit of an overlap, which can cause some confusion, but let's break it down so that you can understand exactly what's happening here. Starting from the top, when you open OneDrive, you're going to land on the homepage. At the top here, we have For You, and this is going to be some suggested documents that you might be looking for. Then down below, we have our recent documents. And there's also these little helpful filters where you can narrow down the type of document that you might be looking for. I'm just going to go back to all. And one thing that's quite handy here is that below the file name, you're going to see a title. And in this case, that is actually the team name or the SharePoint site name where this file is stored. That can just give you a helpful hint of where this file is coming from. And so that's an example of a team file. But if we scroll on down further, then you're going to notice that it may say My Files as well. So My Files are going to be files that are actually stored in your own personal OneDrive. So even though OneDrive is really your own personal treasure chest, we can still access all of our files within your Microsoft ecosystem from this homepage within OneDrive. Moving along the left navigation, we have My Files. And this is your dedicated space to store personal work files that are not connected to a Microsoft team. So, this is where you can store your own notes or resources that only you need access to. And you'll also notice that there are going to be some default folders here that are automatically created by Microsoft. For example, these team chat files or OneNote loop files. So I recommend that if you are creating any of your own folders in here, is to define a color for them so that you can easily identify which folders are created by you. So you can create the folder and then we can select the ellipses here, go down to folder color and then select your desired color. And then down below, we have quick access. So these are actually quick links to access your SharePoint document libraries to avoid you from having to dig through and navigate to specific SharePoint sites. So, for example, if you are going to be working within one SharePoint site a lot, you want to access those documents regularly, then we can just pin that document library to the top. And since we don't see that dog apparel team that we created earlier, we can just navigate to more places and then locate the team in the SharePoint site document library that way. And now, if you have found this tutorial helpful, then I know that 92% of you watching right now are not subscribed to my channel. And if you would like me to continue creating content like this, then please hit that subscribe button because it helps me out far more than you could ever imagine. And after you're subscribed, then you can check out this Microsoft Teams for Beginners tutorial.